So today the topic is epidemic or pandemic, an Ayurvedic perspective. So in this presentation, I'll be touching upon a few of these aspects. So one is that firstly, I want to give a brief introduction as to what Ayurveda really is and what Ayurveda deals with. So that is the first thing. And secondly, how Ayurveda conceptualizes the idea of epidemics or pandemic, whatever. And thirdly, what is the root cause of an epidemic outbreak or pandemic outbreak? And lastly, Ayurveda's approach to managing COVID-19 and some of the preventive measures through which we can protect ourselves. So here on the screens, you can see a term called Chanapadodvamsa. So when we say epidemics or pandemics in context of Ayurveda, so the situation that is there right now and the events that we are witnessing right now, there is an exact match in the scriptures, especially the Charaka Samhita, wherein you can completely relate what is happening now and what is written in the scriptures. So that is found in a section of Charaka Samhita called as Vimanasthana, which exclusively deals with this topic called Janapada Udvamsa. So this whole presentation, epidemic and Ayurvedic perspective, or how Ayurveda conceptualizes the whole idea of epidemics, actually is concentrated in this concept called Janapada Udvamsa of Charaka Samhita. So here, as we can see, the term Janapada Udvamsa has two terms in it. One is the Janapada and Udvamsa. So when we loosely translate it, it comes down to destruction en masse or destruction of settlements. So there is some sort of a destruction of communities or group of people in large numbers. So that is what is defined by the term Janapada Udvamsa. So the whole presentation today revolves around this concept of Janapada Udvamsa, why there is Janapada Udvamsa, why there is such a destruction, and what is the root cause of such a destruction. But when we say Janapadodvamsa, so this is actually a result, that is an outcome or that is the effect of some cause. So the destruction of masses or destruction of settlements is a result or effect that we are seeing because of some cause or some process which has led to destruction of masses. But why at all does it happen is the real crux of the whole presentation, and that is what we are intending to know. So when we say that the cause is different and the destruction of masses is just an effect, so the question comes whether we can directly, or is Janapadodvamsa, that is the destruction of masses, beyond epidemic or pandemic? Or can we just simply equate it to the term epidemic? So that is the moot question. But before actually going into the depths of epidemics as per Ayurveda, I think it is very essential for us to know what Ayurveda really is, because there are a number of things that come, that we think of when we say Ayurveda. So we think it is a herbal medicine, use of oils, use of diet, use of yoga. There are many things that comes to the mind when we think of Ayurveda. But what Ayurveda really is. So only when we understand the spheres in which the Ayurveda operates, the spheres it reaches to, only then we'll be able to understand, or we'll be able to have a bigger picture of the cause and the effect, which is the epidemics or the Janapadodvamsa. So only when we understand the spheres of Ayurveda, different layers of Ayurveda, only then we'll have a better idea of what epidemics in Ayurveda is. So this is the definition of Ayurveda. First, there are two shlokas, the first one and second one. So they are present in two different contexts in Charaka Samhita. So Ayurveda is a shastra which defines hita hitam sukham dukkham ayustasya hita hitam manam cha chittacha yatroktam ayurveda sa uchyate. So if I have to simplify, so this is the pictorial representation of that definition. So both the definitions. So here we can see So Ayurveda. So there are two terms, Ayu and Veda. So let's just first define the term Ayurveda, then let's explore it. So first is Ayu. So again here Ayu, it can the most common translation that we find for Ayu is the lifespan, but the actual meaning of Ayu is something else. But for now, for this slide, let's just keep that as Ayu or lifespan. So this Ayu is basically of four types. It is Hitayu, Ahitayu, Sukhayu, and Dukhayu. So I think it is this much information is sufficient for now. So a science or a shastra which actually deals with uh, fixing of quantum of Ayu, which is the measurement of Ayu. It fixes the quantum, or it actually tries to elicit the quantum of Ayu of a person. That is Ayurveda, and that which defines the lakshanas, or which gives the signs and symptoms of these Ayus. So, in a person, what are the lakshanas that will show that the person is having hitayu, or that the person is having sukhayu? So, all the features have been detailed in Ayurveda. So that shastra is Ayurveda. And finally, and most importantly, the Shastra which actually details about the Hita and Ahita for Ayu. So, which recommends what is Hita and what is Ahita to the Ayu. So, by Hita and Ahita, we can say what is conducive and what is non-conducive to Ayu, or that all the modalities which enhance the Ayu or which deplete the Ayu. So all these things, that which fixes the quantum and that which gives the features of all these IUs, and that which recommends IU enhancers and IU depleters, together, all these together form the definition of Ayurveda. Now, like I said earlier, so Ayurveda, there are two terms, Ayu and Veda. So here we haven't yet defined the very term Ayu. That also is very essential. So let's go to the definition of Ayu. So what is Ayu? So it's not just lifespan, or it is not just the duration between birth and death. Of course, that also forms a definition, but it has much more to it. So Charaka Samhita defines Ayu as Sharira, Indriya, Sattva, Atma, Samyoga. So Ayu is a conglomeration of four different components, which is the Sharira, Indriya, Sattva, and Atma. So Sharira, we all know, it is the physical body. Indriya, all the components which help in cognition, sensory faculties, etc. And Sattva, the processing and memory component. And Atman, the embodied being. So each one of us has Ayu, and it is the conglomeration of all the four components. So it's not like we remove one limb out of it or one component and you can still survive. It is not that, because it is essentially the conglomeration of all the four components. If not, there is no existence. So Ayu is a conglomeration of all the four components, and the science which measures it, or which measures the Ayu, or measures the quantum of, which measures the quantum of Ayu in terms of Sharira, Indriya, Atman, and Sattva, and that which gives out features of whether this person is Sukhayu or Dukhayu, or how the state of Sharira is, how the state of Indriya is, how the state of Sattva is, how the state of Atma is. So that is Ayurveda, and ultimately, Ayurveda is that Shastra which recommends what is Hita to all of these components of Ayu. So when we say Ayu enhancers, or that Ayurveda enhances Ayu of an individual, it means it is enhancing the Ayu from all four directions. Like all four components are being honed, or all four components are being enhanced, or there is a level of transcendence in all the four components. So it's not just the physical body, or reversing the premature graying, or it is not just that. It is not the physical thing, but it is also enhancement of the sense faculties, enhancement of sattva, and also ultimately it is leading you to moksha marga or sadhana marga. So this whole thing actually comprises of Ayurveda, and this Ayu without four components is not complete, and there is no existence without it. So there has to be four components, and equal enhancement of all the four components only will lead to enhancement of Ayu and further moksha. Now, we've had the background that what Ayurveda Ayu is and what Ayurveda deals with. So now it is difficult to think that it is just a system of medicine because it is something more. But what is it that makes Ayurveda special or stand out? And also there is also there comes a question that, okay, what is Ayurveda interested in treating? So we know, like we hear that Ayurveda is good for diabetes or hypertension, for COVID-19. There are many things. So we only know about the physical ailments. So is Ayurveda only interested in treating the physical ailments, like the physical body, so that your body is fit, then you can go in for yoga and then sadhana. So is Ayurveda only for Deha Shuddhi, or is it only for to have a fit body? So no. Why? Because there are two terms here, Sharirika and Manasika Rogas. So here, again, the first shloka says, Laukika people are those who are afflicted with Sharira and Manasa Rogas. So I am a Laukika person. So I am afflicted with, I will be, or I am susceptible to both Sharira as well as Manasa Rogas. So this is the broad category of diseases that Ayurveda makes. One is the Sharira and Manasika Roga, and you can find this reference throughout the Samhitas. And this Sharira and Manasika Roga, second term that you see in second shloka. So that this is actually talking about Ayurveda Pradurbhava, or instance which talks about how Ayurveda came into being, or how it manifested. The body of knowledge was there, but it was not put in a well structured manner, or it was more of avyakta. It became vyakta. But what was the reason? Because people started getting, at some point, people started getting afflicted with Sharira, Manasa, Agantu Vyadhis. So that is when the need for such a science arose, and that is when Ayurveda came into being. It is only a manifestation. It is not utpatti, or it is not creation afresh. It is only a manifestation to a clearer form. So now we know there are two categories of disease which Ayurveda is interested in. One is the Sharirika, and the second one is the Manasika Roga. So here again, when we say Manasika Roga, the first thing that crosses the mind is we think of psychiatric disorders. Either it could be schizophrenia, or at the most epilepsy, or bipolar disorders. So these are the things that we usually correlate to Manasika Rogas. But what does Ayurveda have to say about Manasika Rogas? It says, तयोः विकार रजस्तमश्च मानसौ दोषौ तयोः विकाराः काम क्रोध लोभ मोह ईर्ष्या मान. So these are nothing but expansion of the Arishad Vargas. So the Manasika Rogas that Ayurveda is talking about here is the Kama Krodhadi, the negative emotions, or that is a loose translation. So Kama Krodha Lobha. So these negative emotions are actually considered as the Manasika Vikaras, or Manasika Rogas, from which we have to protect ourselves. So that is also why I mentioned about Sukhayu in previous slides. So that is the desired condition or ideal condition for a person to reach greater heights in spiritual practice. So the very first symptom of Sukhayu is Sharira Manasabhyam Rogabhyam Anabhidhritasya. So a person is said to have a Sukhayu Lakshana, or is said to have attained Sukhayu if he is free from Sharira Manasa, or he is no more susceptible to Sharira Manasa Vyadhis. So either he's neither is he getting Sharira Vyadhis, and also he's not getting afflicted with these Kama, Krodhadi also. So that is the primary, that is the first and foremost a sign to say that the person has attained the Sukhayu Lakshana. Also, when Ayurveda mentions that it has recognized that Kamadi is the Manasika Roga. So obviously there has to be some remedy to counter it. So like I mentioned earlier, Ayurveda mentions remedies for all the four components of Ayu. So it's not just Sharira, medicines for Sharira, therapies for Sharira. It's not just that. So it exclusive mentions of Indriya chikitsa, like what has to be done in order to enhance the Indriya Shakti, Indriya Jaya, how to attain Indriya Jaya, and Atma Shuddhi, Sattva Shuddhi. There are separate measures. Like that, the Manasika Rogas, there is a list of things that one should do in order to get rid of Manasa Rogas, which includes Gnana, Vijnana, Dhairya, Smriti, and Samadhi. So these are nothing but a beginning of the spiritual practices. Now, this is also why Ayurveda defines the very term or very idea of swasthya as swasthya of all the four components of Ayu. So I mentioned Sharira, Indriya, Sattva, Atma as the components of Ayu and enhancement of them as the ultimate goal. So here, the term swasthya or the health as per Ayurveda also is defined in the similar way. So the shloka that you can see is Karyam Dhatu Samyam. So that is nothing but a synonym for swasthya or arogya or health, loose translation. So the first few lines talk about sharira. So it talks about signs and symptoms in the sharira, which indicate that a person is healthy. Last line talks about sarva akarehi mano buddhi indriyanam avyapattiriti. So when you have to call a person as a swastha or that he is healthy, he has to invariably possess healthy avyapatti state or healthy states of sharira, indriya, mana, and atma. Only then you can call a person as healthy. So same definition, similar definition could be found in Sushruta Samhita also, which says samadosha samagnischa samadhatu malakriya. So these are pertaining to sharira. And second line, prasanna, atma, indriya, and mana. Only when the atma, indriya, mana are in the state of prasannata, that we can call a person as swastha. So this is exactly why there is also an argument that Ayurveda is only a medical science, so that it has nothing to do with spirituality, or it is no way useful in moksha. So because Ayu is a conglomeration of different components like Atma, etc. Ayurveda just makes some passing remarks or passing mentions about yogic practices, but it cannot be individually considered as a moksha shastra or that which leads to moksha. There is an argument, but I don't think that holds water. Why? Because, like I said earlier, the very idea of swasthya, that is dhatu samya, which is the goal of Ayurveda, or especially Charaka Samhita. So attaining the state of samya in the dhatus is the ultimate goal. And when you have to say that the person has attained dhatu samya, like I said earlier, there has to be enhanced state of atma, indriya, mana along with sharira also. That is why enhancement of all the four components will lead to dhatu samya, and further it can Ayurveda in itself can be called as a moksha shastra. So in this background, we will have to look at the epidemics also. So Ayurveda not only is important in the mundane sphere, but also in the spiritual layer. Why? Because it is incomplete. The very Ayu is incomplete. The very idea of Dhatu Samya, health, everything is incomplete without those components. Now, coming to epidemics proper. So the whole entire Charaka Samhita is mentioned or it is explained in this pattern: cause, presentation, solution. So whole of Charaka Samhita actually is in the seed form. It is present in this format or in this design. Cause for everything is mentioned. How it presents is mentioned. And what is the remedy? How can you counter it? So we discussed that epidemics can be brought. It can be brought under Janapadodvamsa. So what is this sign? Like when we say Janapadodvamsa, we identify a particular condition with the way it presents. So this is the presentation or linga. This is how it presents. So in Janapadodvamsa, it says people with different body constitution. We have different prakriti. Our food habits are different. Our strength, bala, sharira bala is different. So our mental state is different. Vayas or the age is different. Yet we are getting afflicted with same kind of disease simultaneously at a given point in time. So this is the presentation which is mentioned in Janapadodvamsa Adhyaya in context of epidemics. Now, when we look at this, this looks more or less similar to the modern definition of epidemic or pandemic. The occurrence in a community of cases of a particular disease in numbers which are clearly in excess of that expected for that population and for that time of the year. So this looks more or less similar. So can we conclude that Janapadodvamsa is equal to epidemics, or can it be correlated directly to epidemic? Can we conclude that? So the answer is a no. So we'll explore later, like why and how. If epidemics can be brought under Janapadodvamsa, why and why not? Or if we can equate it to Janapadodvamsa, why and why not? So now there comes a question. So here they've mentioned that people with different body constitution food. So every individual is different, yet they are getting afflicted with same kind of disease. So why is that? So the same thing, that query is answered in the Charaka Samhita itself. It says human beings, despite being asamana, dissimilar, we are all different individuals, we are all different. Yet the common factors like Vayu, Jala, Desha, Kala. So these are the common factors which are influencing all human beings. So these common factors are actually responsible when they get afflicted. So when they're functioning in normalcy, they endo health and they are conducive to health. But when they get impaired or if there is some kind of a derangement, then there is ill health or disease. Or in other words, there also can be epidemics. So even though we are dissimilar, since these things are similar or common to all individuals across the globe, there is at the same point in time, we are getting same kind of disease. Now, again, how do we know that these factors are impaired or deranged? Like, how do we know that Vayu, Jala, Desha, Kala are impaired? And one more thing here is Vayu and Kala. So, out of the four components, Vayu and Kala are very important because they are all powerful. So, I'll give the reasons in future slides. But for now, like, how do we identify that there is some kind of a derangement or impairment in these factors? So that also has been given in Charaka Samhita in detail. So these are some of the real world examples for deranged desha, that is deranged locality, deranged region, or deranged winds, deranged water, and deranged kala. So this is an example. This is one of the examples. So if there is deranged desha, there are following symptoms. One is Kshubita Udirna Jalashaya. So we witnessed a lot of floods in 2019 and 2020. So that is one example. And there were also instances of earthquakes, Bhumikampa, Pratata Nirghata, lot of thunderbolts and lightnings, like unusual. So these are usually seen, but there were some unusual patterns to it. Shwagana Udbhranta Vyathita, howling of dogs, So these, some of these features actually indicate that there is some kind of derangement in the desha or the locality that we are residing in. So likewise, the derangement in the water or jala that we are drinking. So how do we identify? So there are many lakshanas, or there are many signs which show that the water is not having the characteristics it must have. So one first and foremost thing is if it loses its original characteristics, then it means that there is some kind of a derangement. So either in excess or or on the lower side. So if there is some sort of derangement. And second one is if the aquatic plants start abandoning the waters, then that also means that the water is deranged. So here I don't want to use the word polluted waters, because I think pollution, of course, can be included under this, but this derangement of water it conveys a bigger meaning. Third one is Vayu. So the winds. How do you know that the winds are there is some kind of derangement in the Vayu? So there is a Lakshana, Ati Kundalina. So a lot of cyclones in 2019, 2020, back-to-back cyclones we had. And Asatmya Gandha Bashpa. So this happened in 2020 May, I think, Vishakhapatnam gas leak. So there was asatmya, non-conducive fumes or toxins in the air, etc. Ati Bhairava Arava. So winds with scary sounds. So that is what is meant by Ati Bhairava Arava. Now, we were talking about Vayu. So again here, when we say Vayu, it is not just plain wind. So of course, it can be loosely translated as wind, but still Vayu is that component which has two layers to it. One is again the Alaukika and Laukika, which is metaphysical, and the physical Vayu that we see, that is the wind around us. So here, Charaka Samhita especially emphasizes that metaphysical Vayu, or the all-powerful Vayu, which is also addressed as Vishnu. Vayu has a synonym called Vishnu. Vayu eva Bhagavan, even that is mentioned in Charaka Samhita with many other synonyms. Especially this metaphysical layer of Vayu is responsible for maintaining the ecological balance. So let's see what, when Vayu is in normalcy, when the Vayu Bhagavan is happy and is looking after us, what are the symptoms? or what are the functions that it carries out? So one is sustenance of earth. The sustenance of earth is carried out by normally functioning Vayu, supports the kindling of Agni, movement of all the celestial bodies, creation of clouds, rains, maturity and sustenance of fruiting, flowering, everything is dependent on Vayu Devata. Power of germination. So this power of germination is given to the seed by this metaphysical entity of Vayu. So similarly, like when it gets agitated, what happens? When this Vayu gets agitated, so the previous signs that we saw, like cyclone, Atikundalina Vayu. So these lakshanas are seen, which manifests in the physical world. Along with that, it causes impairment in the seasonal pattern or seasons. So we have 6 seasons, and there is a particular pattern to each season, and there are some changes that are supposed to be there in each season. So that is considered as normalcy. When this Vayu gets impaired or deranged, or when it gets agitated, it leads to impairment in the Shadrutu or 6 seasons. So impaired Vayu can also be responsible for pralaya or doomsday. It can lead to destruction. And finally, this Vayu, metaphysical Vayu, can also lead to epidemic outbreak. So we know that these 4 factors are common, but still Vayu and Kala out of the 4 are very important. Why? Because they are all powerful and they are Vishnu Swarupi. So they are the controllers. So these are some other lakshanas or signs which indicate deranged Vayu. Unmathanam Anokahana, so uprooting of trees. Udvartana Sarasam Pratisarana Apaganam. So the reverse flow of rivers or flow of rivers in the opposite direction also is attributed to agitated Vayu. So Shasyanam Asanghatah, drought and lack of yield or reduced produce. So all these are attributed to agitated Vayu. Submarine earthquakes, Utvedanam Sagaranam. So that also is caused by agitated Vayu. So today, this is the conclusion. This is the conclusion that scientists are coming. Climate conundrum: could COVID-19 be linked to early Arctic ice melt? So this is what is being said now. But these references we find it in Charaka Samhita, which was written thousands of years ago. Now, coming to the last and most important component among the 4 factors, Kala. So we finished Desha, Jala, Vayu, and now we are talking about Kala. So like Vayu, Kala also is an all-powerful entity, and that also is addressed as Kalohi Nama Bhagavan Swayambhuhu. So this Kala, of course, we have different measures of Kala. We can say it is Akshinimesha or blinking. We can divide it into a Mahurta, so Paksha, months, Rutus. So these are nothing but categorization of Kala. But Kala, this again, there is some metaphysical controller, entity which controls, and its reflection that we are all able to see. So here, this is mainly pertaining to Kala in terms of Rutu, so that we can see. So when the Rutu pattern or the 6 season pattern is in normal state, when it is happening as it is supposed to happen, then in a non-deranged state, it enhances health. So we know we have 6 seasons. So every season is meant to cause some sort of a change in the human body. So of course, there are some certain features or certain climatic changes that is supposed to happen in a particular season. If that is happening in a proper way, then the same effect or the same thing is reflected on the human body as well. So that actually bestows a person with health. If this Kala or Ritu is impaired or it gets deranged, then it causes ill health, and also it is one of the causes for epidemic outbreak. So again, here, how do we know that the Kala is deranged? So this is also some kind of an abstract thing. So Kala, okay, when we say that it is Rutu, we can somehow comprehend, but Kala is much more than that. So let's just concentrate on the physical thing that we can see. So here again, Sushruta Samhita clearly mentions like what are the normal features of a particular Rutu, and what is considered to be what is the impairment, or how can you identify the impairment? So Sushruta Samhita actually enlists the normal features of all the 6 Ritus. So anything other than that, that is, if the Kala or if a season is expressing itself excessively, if there is excessive expression of a particular season, so if there is too much of too cold winters or too much of rains during the rainy season. So that is overexpression of that particular season. Hinalinga, that is under expression. So there had to be rains, but there is no rains. There was no monsoon this year. So that is Hinalinga. And the first one is Viparita Linga. If it is producing contrasting features, so there shouldn't have been any rains during that particular season, but there were too much of rains or like that. So if there is some kind of Viparita or contrasting features, even that indicates that there is some sort of a derangement in Kala or Rutu. So all these things, again, they cause some sort of disturbance in the body, and in the longer run, they are the ones which cause epidemic or pandemic outbreak. So now, before we actually see how this Kala is going to cause an epidemic, I think it is important for us to know how Kala is influencing the human body constantly, and how the body dynamics is directly dependent on Kala. So we can protect ourselves from Jala. So if there is some contamination of water, or if there is deranged water, we can still avoid it. We can still avoid the deranged Vayu also, but we cannot escape this powerful entity called Kala. So even if we are sitting with doors closed, we can't escape from this Kala. So what is it that, like, why is it that Kala is all powerful, and how it is going to influence the body? So now we know that Brahmanda and Pindanda. So there is this constant interaction, and we are constantly communicating with the nature. And nature also is reflecting all its signs and symptoms, all its this changes onto the human being. So here, Kala, both the metaphysical entity as well as its reflection in the form of Rutu, in the form of changes in the climate or exterior. So it affects the human body in the form of Rutu. In summers, there are a set of signs and there are a set of climatic changes that are supposed to happen. So Aditya, Surya Gati, Vayu Gati. So based on these things, there is some amount of change in the gunas or qualities in the human being also. So if there is change in the climate, there is change in the guna, the same thing is imparted to the body also. So it is this way that Kala is constantly affecting us. It is not just the season, but also the diurnal changes. So there is no 1 second wherein we are not in constant communion with the Kala. So there is this constant interaction. And 6 Rutus, these Rutus, or the impact of Kala also is in the form of the food that we eat. Why? Because if there is, so now this is the beginning of rains. So since there is a lot of moisture or unwanted moisture, I can say. So since there is a lot of clay and unwanted moisture in this particular season, naturally, so the same is imparted to the body also by means of the rains and by means of the climatic conditions. And the same thing is imparted to the food crops also. So the water we give and water we ingest and the water which is used to grow that particular crop. So all these things start imparting those qualities into the crop. And when we ingest that, there is some kind of change in the body dynamics. So this is how, in 2 ways, the Kala is influencing us constantly. So this is an elaboration of the same concept. So we know that the year can be categorized as Dakshinayana and Uttarayana. So Dakshinayana is more of nourishing type. It leads to constructive mechanisms in the body. Uttarayana, on the other hand, is more of depleting kind. So again, this is dependent on the seasons, the state of sun, moon, Vayu, etc. So again, this is going to impact the body in 2 different ways due to change in climate, sun rays, moon rays, wind, water, etc. There is some sort of a change in the gunas in the body. So in other words, you can say there is change in the bhautik constitution, or if you have to put it differently, there is change in the dominance of 6 rasas. So Ayurveda talks about 6 rasas, 6 flavors or tastes: Swadu, Amla, Lavana, Katutikta, Ushana. So there is some dominance and there is some dominance of 1 or 2 rasas in every season. So that is based on the climatic changes in the exterior. And the second one is through the Oshadi, that is the grains, plants that we eat. So again, the change, the climate is imparted to those Oshadi. And that is naturally when we eat it, we are going to get it. So this change in the guna that has happened in the body is the same thing is reflected onto the state of dosha, Agni. Dosha is the 3 doshas, and Agni. Agni is the, if I have to say, it is if I have to simplify, it is digestive and assimilating force. So it impacts the dosha and Agni. And finally, the resultant is there is some sort of an impact on strength, that is Bala and Arogya. So this is how constantly Kala is influencing us. So this is this is also an elaboration of the same thing. Change the gunas. It impacts the doshic cycle. It impacts the Agni. So the same is reflected onto the rasas. So they again influence the doshic state and Agni. And finally, there is some change in the Bala of the Sharira. So like I mentioned earlier, among the 4 factors which are responsible for epidemics, Vayu and Kala are most important. Why? Because they are powerful and they are believed to be Vishnu Swarupi. So this first picture talks about Kala being an Amsha of Vishnu. So this is from Vishnu Purana. And the second shloka talks about Vayu, which is also called as, which has a different name, that is Vishnu, Kanta, Lokanam, Bhavanam, Anu, etc. So these are all powerful entities. Now, so far we've discussed that the derangement in Vayu, Jala, Desha, Kala, so that that derangement has caused the epidemic. So that these are common to all human beings. That is why they are seeing one particular disease at a given point in time. But why did this Vaigunya, or why did this derangement in these factors take place? So that is the primary question. So that is because Charaka Samhita says it is all rooted in the adharma or purvakrita asatkarma. So be the Vayu Vaigunya, derangement in Vayu, derangement of Jala, Desha, Kala, whatever it is just an apparent cause, but the root is in the adharma. Now, adharma. So when we talk of adharma, so again, this is more of an abstract thing, and like we also find it difficult to comprehend. How can adharma bring about some physical change or changes that we can all perceive? You know, like adharma is more of an abstract thing. So how is it going to manifest itself physically? So what are the chain? What is the chain of events that happens? So this is an instance mentioned in the same chapter of Janapadodvamsa of Charaka Samhita. So what happens when there is adharma in a particular region? So when there is too much of many acts of adharma, there is a dominance of adharma over the dharma. So adharma dominates over the dharma. So this particular land, when there is dominance of adharma, is abandoned by the devatas. So when this happens, when the land is abandoned by the devatas, it leads to rutu vyapat. That is, we have to go back to a few slides. So impairment in the seasons. So when the land is abandoned by the devatas, it leads to impairment in the seasons. So and also it leads to a number of other events. That is, once it is abandoned, the rutu gets impaired. The abnormality in rains start. There is abnormality in the winds, abnormality in the soil or earth. Water sources get dried up, and Oshadi, that is the plants, they also lose their original qualities and the potency. So this is how this so-called abstract entity of adharma manifests itself physically. So we may not know that it is rooted in adharma, but we are only seeing these presentations. So there is a lot of change in the season, climate, etc. But we do not know that this actually is rooted in the adharma. Now, to add to that, again, what if the devatas abandon us? So again, this also looks very abstract to us, because devatas, no matter how much we are inclined to Indic studies, we still feel that, okay, how can devatas, or who are the devatas, and how can they influence us, or how can they contribute in maintaining the ecological balance? So this is a reference from Gita, which says, Annad bhavanti bhutani parjanyad anna sambhavah yajnad bhavati parjanyo yajnah karma samudbhavah. So anna, or the food or the crops, when we eat it, so there is nourishment of the individual. So anna, from anna or the ahara, there is production of human beings or the beings. This crop or this produce is a result of vasha, that is the rains. If there is no rains, there is no crops. And this vasha, this rains, proper rains, is a gift of yajna. So it is the yajna, or properly followed yajna, which is actually indirectly resulting in the nourishment of all the human beings. Now again, this too is abstract. And what is its link with the devatas? So next sloka, Devan bhavayatan etan te deva bhavayantu vaha parasparam bhavayantaha. So it means we have to please, or we have to offer devas with devatas with the yajna. Only then they'll be pleased, and they will also bless us in turn in the form of rains and all of the things that we want. So that is the most superficial explanation that I'm giving, just to give it a context. So this is again a reference from Vishnu Purana, which says the very Chaturvarna, Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra, the whole system was created in order that this yajna could be continued, or this yajna can be done in a proper way. So when this yajna goes on in a proper way, the devatas also will be pleased, and they will in turn Yagnaihi apyayita deva vrishtihi utsargena vai prajaha. So there'll be proper rains, and they in turn will contribute in maintaining the ecological balance, and they will sustain the praja. So again, now, why is this important? Since we are talking about adharma being the root cause of everything, I think knowing this is really important, because once we separate this concept with the epidemics or Janapadodvamsa, it will lose its essence, and it will only be epidemics is equal to Janapadodvamsa. So now when we're talking about yagna, is it the dravya rupi yagna? So that we see with the fire and everything. But again, Gita says, no, there are many types of yagna. So there can be dravya yagna, tapo yagna, swadhyaya, and gnana yagna. So here they are talking about, so when there is proper yagna, so this yagna, it could be of any form. So it could be dravya yagna, it could be tapo yagna, swadhyaya, or even the gnana yagna. And Gita goes to an extent of saying that gnana yagna is shreshtatara, that is the most superior among all yagnas. So when this yagna is carried forward, or when this yagna is indulged in constantly, that mental state also should be there in the individuals and in the population. Only then it is possible. So when that happens, consequently, there will be a vrishti and ecological balance and sustenance. Now, since we are talking about adharma, I think, and also adharma causing the epidemics. So when we consider epidemic or COVID-19 in the current situation, if we see that as an individual situation or an isolated situation, it is no more than a flu, or it is just a contagious disease. It gets transmitted from one person to another. So you treat that person, and that is the end of story. But that is not how Ayurveda looks at it. Why? Because any event, so be it the COVID-19 or any disease for that matter, that has to be seen in connection with the past events. So it could be 1 week, 1 month, or years together, or even from yugas. So in case of epidemics and the deterioration that we are seeing, the health condition in the people, I think we need to have a brief description as to how this decline happened through yugas, all the 4 yugas. So we know that we were once, in Hindu civilization, we were once nirogis. There was no roga at all at one point in time in the past. So we were immortals, time immemorial. We were nirogis, but now we are rogis. Like we are afflicted. We are all laukikas, and we are afflicted with sharira and manasika rogas. And then in that age, that is in Satya Yuga, people were amitayushis. There was unlimited lifespan endowed to the praja. But today, the life expectancy is around 69.42 years in 2018. So I think it is important to know the reason why we are here. And this is possible only when we are able to connect to the past situations and the whole process. Only when we know the whole process, how there was the decline in the spirituality, decline in dharma, decline which resulted in causation of disease and decreased lifespan, and also epidemic. So Charaka Samhita says, adharma has been a constant accomplice and cause for Ashubha. So whenever there was Ashubha in all past 4 yugas, 3 yugas, Krita Yuga, Treta Yuga, Dwapara Yuga, and Kali Yuga, there has been, or it is preceded by adharma. It has been a constant accomplice and cause, that is also a cause for Ashubha Utpatti. So it says, this is a reference from the same chapter of Janapadodvamsa, which talks about how disease came into being. So like I said, we were once, our ancestors were once endowed with unlimited lifespan, and they didn't know what roga was. There was no roga at all. There was no disease. Then how did it start? So there has to be a reason for everything, cause and effect. So the cause has been explained beautifully in Charaka Samhita. So it says in Krita Yuga, these are the features of people who lived in Krita Yuga. Important among them are Satya. They were always in the Satya Marga, Dhamma Niyama. They were following Upvasa, Brahmacharya, Vratapara. There was no Raga, Dvesha, Moha, Lobha. So they were free from Manasika Vikaras. There was no Sharirika Roga also. They were free from drowsiness, sleep, or some kind of lethargy, and they did not hoard, or there was no sense of owning. Hence, they were blessed with unlimited lifespan. There was no roga, and the oshadi that they had, the plants that they had, the plant kingdom that was there at that time had a chintya virya. They were very, very potent. So that was the situation in Krita Yuga. So same thing has been mentioned in Vishnu Purana also. People were Vishuddha Acharana, Shuddha Antakarana, they had Shuddha Sattva, and they could easily attain Paramapada, they could easily attain moksha. But what happened later? So towards the end of Treta Yuga, Krita Yuga, there was a factor, the Skala started intervening. What did it do in the beginning of Krita Yuga? This is again from Vishnu Purana. The Kala, the Amsha of Vishnu, it started instigating an installation of Papa Pravritti. There was some kind of seeds of Papa that was sown in the minds of Praja. Purushartha Vigata, they didn't care about that. And there was also this seeds of Raga, Dvesha, Adi, that is the Manasika Vikara. And that was also the time when people started losing their abilities for Rasollasa. They started losing their ability to attain moksha, and they also lost the Ashtasiddhi, which was previously natural to them. So since from yuga to yuga after yuga, we are actually going away from the real self, and that has consequently led to this increased physical things like decreased ayu and lot of rogas, and presently this pandemic. So in Charaka Samhita, first chapter, this shloka says, Vignabhuta yada rogaha pradurbhutaha sharirinam. So again, the Charaka Samhita, this is in a different context. When you look at a shloka as an isolated thing, so there is no connection. You feel that it is like scattered. But Vignabhuta yada rogaha pradurbhuta. So it says in the beginning of Treta Yuga, or towards the end of Krita Yuga, things started changing. It was not as positive as it was during the beginning of Krita Yuga. So towards the end, what happened? The roga started afflicting the people, and it was only then there was need for a science or a shastra which could take care of arogya of praja, so that they could move forward in their sadhana marga. So this is from Charaka Samhita. It says, towards the end of Krita Yuga and beginning of Treta Yuga, that was the time when people started experiencing disease. So that was when there was manifestation of disease. So again, I'm not saying it is Roga Utpatti, it is not creation of Roga, it is only manifestation, because it was there earlier. It only got a clearer form, a much in an expressed form. So people at the end of Krita Yuga, what they did was, since there was also a lot of Adharma Bija and Ragati, like it is mentioned in Vishnu Purana, they started overindulgence, a lot of eating and impaired eating habits, etc. So that caused heaviness in the body. Because of that, there was weakness. From weakness, there was lethargy. And that followed parigraha. They started hoarding. And that hoarding led to greed, that is lobha. And this lobha finally led to kamadi. So the manasika rogas that we spoke about earlier, kama, krodha, lobha. So it was in the beginning of Treta Yuga that people started getting afflicted with the kama, krodha, lobha, moha, etc. So the negative emotions. So this happened, and this followed by the kamadi, there was, as a result, the lifespan reduced, the oshadi qualities that also reduced. There was some disturbance in the body, and there was manifestation of disease. And all through these ages, there has been a consistent decline in the dharma also. So that has actually caused all these. So this decline in ayu, production of roga, manifestation of roga, all these things are just effects of the bigger cause, which is the adharma. So now this is not just, this might seem a little irrelevant. Why? But I feel it is very essential. Why? Because if we see this epidemic as a as an isolated situation, and we also think that today the food that we are getting is not endowed with good qualities, and it is more of contaminated and everything. But we attribute that to pesticides, use of pesticide, pollution, etc. But this is the reason, like even without pesticide, it would have definitely declined. The quality of plant kingdom anyway has declined through these ages because of a decline in the dharma. So this also has led to epidemics. So from Krita, Treta Yuga, Dwapar Yuga, and here we are in Kali Yuga. So there has been a consistent pattern, that is depletion of dharma, which has led to depletion in quality of the plant kingdom. Some sort of disturbance is already set in the body, so you don't have to do anything because that disturbance is already there, and we are only adding to it day after day. So that also there was manifestation of disease, and finally there is reduction in Ayu. So this is the background of how there was production or manifestation of disease and production of epidemic. So this is all the more relevant. Why? Because this whole concept of adharma causing decline in Ayu, adharma causing decline in or causing the disease has been explained in the same chapter of Janapadodvamsa. So this is not an extrapolation. It is mentioned in the same chapter of Janapadodvamsa. Why? Because that is the actual cause, and this epidemic or this COVID-19 is just a presentation. So if we are only looking at COVID-19 and we are treating it, it is just trimming the shoots. So because we are not addressing the root cause is still there, and we'll keep repeating the same mistakes. That is why knowing the root cause, which is the adharma, is important. So if I can sum up the whole thing, Swami Vivekananda's, this is the Swami Vivekananda's quote: "The mainspring of the strength of every race lies in its spirituality, and the death of that race begins the day that spirituality wanes and materialism gains ground." So this is exactly told in Charaka Samhita, that there is a consistent decline in dharma, yajna practices, spirituality practices. So it's not just the Dravya Rupi yajna, but there is a consistent decline in the spirituality, which is actually reflecting on the environment and on this universe also. So in the beginning, I also mentioned that Janapadodvamsa, it can be simply said as destruction en masse. So that is only an effect. So there is destruction of a group of people. But this can happen due to various reasons. So it's not just the epidemic. Epidemic can also cause destruction of masses, but it can also happen due to wars. It can happen due to invasion and attack by Rakshasa Bhutagana and by Shapa, or the curse. But Charaka Samhita says all of this is rooted in the adharma. So the root is adharma. So I think this I'll discuss in the future slide. So what do we do? So we discussed about the presentation, how epidemic presents itself. And we also tried exploring a bit about the hetu, or the cause for such an epidemic, being adharma. But what is the way forward? What is the solution? What is the chikitsa for that? Or what is the aushadha? So it is moving from adharma towards dharma in every sense. So it's not just the adharma to dharma, or re-establishing dharma of everything. So re-establishing dharma of the body, re-establishing dharma of the whole universe. That is the way forward. So when we are talking about COVID-19, I'll just restrict to the body. So it can be done in various methods. One is first one, yukti vipashraya, daiva vipashraya, sadvrita, and ayupalana. So this again, when we say that we are giving a remedy to a particular situation, again we are thinking of human body as a conglomerate of all the four components. It is the body, sense faculties, processing component, and also the embodied being. So this Janapada, this pattern is very, very evident in case of Janapadodvamsa when it talks about the chikitsa. So it prescribes proper dietary regimen, use of medicine and therapies for disease like COVID-19 or any other epidemic disorder, disease. And Daiva Pashraya, since Kala and Vayu, so these are the factors which are impaired, and they need to be restored back to normalcy. For that, we need to go for Daiva Pashraya Chikitsa, that is Shanti, Namaskara, Mantra, Aushadha, so Niyama, Tapa, etc. And Ayurveda also stresses on Ayupalana. So there is also an argument that okay, you can do anything, but you can still survive. It's okay. You don't have to diet, or you don't have to indulge in. You don't have to restrict yourself. You can eat everything you want. So, but that is not how Ayurveda looks at it, because uh, Ayu Palana, so you're actually maintaining what is already there, but it is not a one-time thing. So even when we are talking about the preventive measures, it's not a one-time thing. So you do one good thing at this moment, so that is over. That you can't carry forward for coming years. So that has to be a constant thing. So you're doing a positive thing, the positive effect is endowed to the body. You do a negative, the same is endowed. So you can't carry forward one act of yours and say that, okay, I had done this preventive measure, still I got this. So that is not, that argument doesn't hold good here. So it also talks about Ayu Palana. So there are many modalities in which will help you stay away from this disease. So Sadvrita. So like I said, Sadvrita has more to do with enhancing of your indriyas, manas, and finally, it enhances, or it helps in spiritual transcendence. So the Sadvrita is actually a part of Dharma Shastra, which is there in Charaka Samhita. So this Janapadodvamsa and epidemic, all these modalities, a mix of all these modalities have to be employed. So it's not just medicines or diet, but this also, Sadvrita and Daivapashraya Chikitsa. So now, when we are talking, let's just concentrate on COVID-19. So COVID-19 disease. So what are we actually looking at? So are we looking at the virus, or what is it that Ayurveda is trying to do when it says it is going to cure or it is going to manage COVID-19? So here, Ayurveda doesn't really look at this as a pathogen induced disease. Of course, that could be that is what you see, but the basic susceptibility or the disturbance that the body has, that is actually giving the conducive environment for a pathogen to settle. So let's just forget about the pathogen. So we are only trying to correct and reinstate the lost normalcy in the body. So when we try doing that, that is when we are trying to restore uh, the dosha, dhatu, agni, mala. So these are the four fundamental components. When we are trying to restore this, automatically there is no the susceptibility will reduce, or it will vanish, and ultimately, as a result, you'll be free from COVID-19. So we are only concentrating on the body and not the pathogen. So to keep your body in a healthy, susceptibility-free condition through diet, lifestyle, and with some medication is the entire goal. So what are you going to do with all this? So when we say immunity or disease resistance, I think all the components play a role. So it is the properly functioning dosha, properly functioning dhatu, mala, agni. But it is a mix of all this. So when you say a person is healthy, that is a mix of all the four components functioning together. But more so, we have to concentrate on agni, the state of agni and bala. So this is not, so by bala, it's not like you directly give some bala inducing or strength inducing drugs like Chavanprash or some ashwagandha. It is not that. So Ayur Varna Bala Swastam Utsahopachayo Prabha. So Ayur Varna Bala. So this shloka is not of bala, but it is talking about Agni. So once you start maintaining your Agni in normalcy, when you keep it in kindled state, it will consequently control the doshic activity also. So even if there is some disturbance in the dosha, it regulates it. Why? Because Agni is stronger. And also there is mutual interaction between Agni and dosha activity. So the keeping Agni in good state is very important. And consequently, this when Agni is functioning in normalcy, it will also endow a person with better disease resistance. I don't want to call it as immunity, but better disease resistance and ability to fight out the disease. So both of them are important. So even if you contract a disease, if a person has not been abusing his body with the wrong diet and lifestyle, so his body is in a relatively better condition. So if that person gets COVID-19, the recovery is faster, and chances of him getting fatal complications is lesser, on a lesser side. But the person who has been abusing his body with wrong diet and lifestyle, saying that this is the in this age, like within 40, you have to eat everything. So you can eat whatever you want. So there is no direct relation between what you eat and how your health is. So that thing is not accepted by Ayurveda. So in such a state, if a person gets COVID-19, the recovery is uh, it is not at all faster. It takes a lot of time, and that could also most of the times leave lasting trail. So there can be post-COVID complications in the form of post-COVID complications. So the person will become fever-free, but the remnants or the traces of the doshas or the damage the damage that has already happened to the body, that still remains because we have not done anything to correct it. So that will present itself in one or the other form. It could be COVID complication, or it could be something else, or it can surface after many months, 3 or 4 months. So that is how. That is why we have to keep the Agni in good shape. So consequently, rest everything will happen. So again, just to reiterate the importance of Kala on the human body. So we discussed about how diet and lifestyle is important in maintaining the Agni. So consequently, it will give a better disease resistance. Again, following a proper seasonal regimen. So here again, it is not it is not, it cannot be generically applied. So a seasonal regimen, so in winters you have to do abhyanga, so that is given in Charaka Samhita, but not everybody can do that. So even now in rainy season, vyakta amla lavana sneha, so there is one advice, there is an advice which says you should do this during this season. But again, for every vidhi, for every advice, there is a caution, there is an exception, and there is a contraindication. So with all this, we have to treat a person. Only then, even by following or by picking suitable therapies and measures from seasonal regimen, we are actually giving a body better resistance. So since Kala is actually controlling the dynamics in the body, dosha, agni, dhatu, mala. So these are the active participants. So since Kala is constantly controlling them, we need to counter the effects with suitable diet and lifestyle. So, but it is not the generic use of either dinacharya or rutucharya. So here are some generic do's and don'ts. So irrespective of what the state of body is, prakriti is, but these are some generic do's and don'ts that one can follow. So one is here mostly I'm talking about the myths. Eating a light diet, idli, bread, milk. So this is usually believed to be light, even dosa. So that is believed to be light, and it is called as pathya during fever. But that is not so, because they are actually going to increase the susceptibility, and they are going to contribute, and they are more friendly to the pathogen and hostile to the body. So that is why you have to stay away from this. So you can use grains, rice, wheat, ragi, which is 1 year old, preferably. So again, based on congeniality, like you're habituated to rice, then you can continue to eat rice. Like that, you can apply to wheat, etc. And you have to strictly avoid substances made out of dough. So it's like it could be dosa, it could be chapati, it could be roti, anything made of dough. So abstain from using curds. So that is one other thing. Do not eat frequently. So we often hear this advice that okay, break your meals to either 4 or 5 or up to 6. But this is actually contributing to the problem, because you're constantly bothering your digestive system. So we can't be just looking at what the absorption rate is. It is not just that. Why? Because earlier in Ayurveda, it was only 2 annakalas, only twice a day you're supposed to have meals. But today we have brought it to 3, and now it is 6. But at least I think it is better we have to stick to 2 or maximum 3. So avoid eating frequently. So indulging in exercises. Again, for current situation, I think it is better to avoid exercises for at least 80 to 85% of the population. Judicious use of boiled water. So it could be hot, or it could be in the room temperature. So that again depends on condition of the patient. So we can't give blanket advice that everybody should drink hot water, liters of hot water. So again, next one is do not drink water in excess. So there is also a myth that drinking water in excess is going to flush away the toxin and viral load and everything. But this is actually impairing the Agni. So it is not helping the body. Because if you're kindling the Agni, you're actually helping the body fight the disease. But this use of excessive water will actually impair the functioning of Agni, and it will actually favor the pathogen to thrive. So avoid including a vegetable green rich diet. So it is not because of physical contamination. But since we've discussed this earlier, so this Kala or the Rutu also affects the Oshadi, the plant kingdom also. So whatever the negative effects of these climatic changes are also endowed to that plant kingdom. So when we eat that, especially in rainy season, it is going to cause a lot of problems. So avoid sweet and sour dishes. Avoid sleeping during the day. And very importantly, do not self-medicate. Turmeric, amrita, ginger, these things cannot be given generically. So they are patient-specific. And most of them, uh, one thing is that the dosage has to be fixed, and we should see what suits whom. So it can't be given generically. And very importantly, so when I say generic do's and don'ts, it only means that uh, in current situation, 80 to 90% of people can follow this, but still 10% of people will need this. So that is the beauty of Ayurveda. So that is why no substance or no food article is can be generically good and bad at all times. So idli is patya for some, but apatya for some other person. So, but 80 to 90% of population right now, the body state is such that these things should be avoided. So, and also Ayurveda in the context of Janapadodvamsa, it propounds to indulge in below modalities and activities like judicious use of panchakarma, shodhana, use of medicament and therapies, and use of rasayana modalities. Again, there is one more a myth that you can directly go in for rasayana, but there is a prerequisite that you need to achieve before we go in for rasayana therapies. So we have Chavanprasha. So they say that rasayana has been explained in Janapadodvamsa context. Then why not give Chavanprash to COVID patients? But the like I said, there is for every advice there is a clause and there is contraindication, exception, everything. So unless we achieve that prerequisite condition in the body, we can't directly go in for rasayana use. So along with that, we have to practice truthfulness, compassion, charity, following prescribed code of conduct, that is Sadvrita, Shiva Aradhana, following Brahmacharya, taking part in satsangs, indulging in spiritual discourses, gaining Indriya Jaya, Prayaschitta, precious stones, wearing precious stones, Japa, Homa, Yaga, etc. And finally, Namaskara Mudra. So these are the spiritual modalities which we have to do during a pandemic or epidemic. So when we look at COVID-19, again, I just want to repeat the same thing. When we look at COVID-19 as an individual condition or an isolated situation, it is no more than a flu or it is just a contagious disease. But when we look at COVID-19 with this background of Ayurveda, the layers wherein Ayurveda operates, and the depth of epidemic or its roots in adharma, it gives an entirely different picture. That is why it's not just this isolated COVID-19 situation that Ayurveda is interested, but it is the bigger picture, the ecological balance and re-establishing dharma in the universe that Ayurveda is interested. So this is the first question I started the presentation with. So is Ayurveda just a medical science, especially in with special reference to Janapadodvamsa? So there are a number of things which Ayurveda talks about. So it is also a medical science. It is treating body as a body, different components of body. It is also talking about ecological balance and how we have to try maintain it. It is talking about yogic practices. So it's not just the postures, but the whole of spirituality, astronomy and astrology. So the very chapter of Janapadodvamsa starts by saying there is some Guru Shishya conversation wherein Guru says there is already premonitory signs of a changed gati of the celestial bodies, so which could be indicative of imminent epidemic. So this is also talking about astronomy and astrology, and finally Dharma Shastra. So Ayurveda encompasses all these. So when we have to study Ayurveda, we also have to study these signs. Only then the knowledge of Ayurveda and the practice of Ayurveda is complete. So I'd like to end my presentation with this shloka, which talks about how Ayurveda is not just a medical science, but it alone in itself can lead a person to moksha. Tasya ayushaha punyatamo vedo vedavido mataha vakshyate yan manushyanam lokayoho ubhayor hitam.
I actually just was curious to ask this question because some Ayurvedic practitioners they have diagnosed COVID-19 as a Vata Kapha Jwara. So do you think that is the case, and how do you I mean, to what extent do you agree, and how does Ayurveda diagnose COVID-19?
I think Ankurji, it's we can broadly bring this COVID-19 under Jwara, the heading of Jwara. But again, there can be many categories or many types of it, because even I have heard many people say that it is mostly Vata Kaphaja. But interestingly, the cases that I have managed, it is not Vata Kaphaja. It is more of Vata Paitika and Sanipata. So it is another kind of Jwara only. So again, I'd like to say that even though we are talking about the Samana Vyadhi, so same disease, so that same disease can be said as this Jwara. We can keep that as Jwara. But again, in that we again need to we need to put in that individuality or that uniqueness principle into that. So it could be because of Vata Paitika or Shuddha Vata. There can be many types. So we can't be simply saying that it is always Vata Kaphaja. That is not possible, because that the presentation also is affected by that depends on a person's nidana sevana, that is what he has been doing all these years, the causative factors that he's indulging in. So that also has a great role to play. So this doshic nuances, I think that needs to be individualized. We need to diagnose it individually.
Okay, thank you. And I think your treatment accordingly will also be
Yeah, correct.
individually. Thank you. Thank you.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you, Priyanka ji, for this very comprehensive, presentation. I
Thank you.
think covering almost every aspect that Ayurveda deals with. And I always wonder about, the breadth and depth of, Ayurveda that it covers. Okay. And so it talks about individual, ethics. It also talk about ecology. It also talks about, medicine, health. Okay. So this holistic approach is something missing in modern medicine, Western modern medicine. Okay. They have always worked upon fragmentary approach of looking at things, or reductionist way of looking at things. But we have also seen that Western modern science has made good progress when in critical conditions. We can say that, okay, when you have to do heart surgery, when you have critical problems. So isn't this COVID situation today is one of those critical situations, because looking at the causes going back to, because we haven't handled them back earlier, and now we are facing the consequences. So maybe at this point of time we have to depend more on Western modern medicine. Is this happening? That's why people are trusting more Western modern medicine as compared to Ayurveda. Or maybe, if I put it this way, why Ayurveda is not successfully putting itself, marketing itself for more better cure and efficient cure as compared to Western modern medicine.
um, Ramji, I think so. When we okay, like it's okay to consider this as critical condition and we need emergency management. That is all okay, and I'm no way demeaning the role of or downplaying the role of Western medicine. Of course, we need to make use of Western medicine rationally, right point in time. But I do feel even now it is not too late. At least like now we can concentrate on the individuals, so the presentation level, and then we can work in correcting their dharma. But even when we are talking about this individual correction, so a person, if he's starting Ayurveda meds and diet right from the day one, that is even from the time where he's asymptomatic, the so-called asymptomatic phase, if he's doing that, I think most of the conditions, the worsening of the condition can definitely be prevented. So, and there are many instances wherein they have treated critical cases also with breathlessness. I also have treated one such case, but I do not want to make hollow claims that like, okay, you don't need allopathy, you don't need Western medicine. I'm not saying that. I think we have to integrate, but not parallelly. It's not the parallel use of Ayurveda and allopathy. But still, even think even in this critical, so-called critical situation, we can still make use of Ayurveda, but in a right way. And like you rightly mentioned, Ayurveda is not being propagated in the right. It is not placing itself properly. Why? Because there are many confusing and contrasting opinions, and there are many such advices floating around. So I think that is one reason why, because people get confused and they don't know what is authentic and what is not. So yeah.
Yes, and related to that, when I see on ground, you'll always find people consulting Ayurvedic Vaidya. Okay, even in this pandemic, before going to allopathic doctor, sometimes those who have certain background in this. So certainly that happens because when it comes to diet, when it comes to lifestyle, when it comes to home medicines and all that, we all depend on Ayurveda. We know that allopathic doctors are not going to suggest anything related to that. Okay. So on the ground, the situation is quite different. Majority of the people still trust Ayurveda. But when you look at the top, they are quite confused and could not make up their mind that how much to trust and how much to take Ayurveda ahead. Do you see this dilemma?
Definitely, Ramji, and I don't want to blame. I'm not blaming anybody, because it is the failure of Ayurvedic community as a whole, that we are not able to project ourselves in the right way. And there are many not so authentic things also happening around. So first and foremost thing that I would like to highlight is the generic use of these medicines. So I don't want to name the medicines, but I think they're not in any way reflecting the essence of what Ayurveda says. When you say this particular drug, you give it to everybody, that itself is undermining the principle of Ayurveda. So this is the practical problem.
Thank you, Priyanka. Thank you.
I had a question. One thing that we see in contrast to what you have written, like all of us, in our family have gone through COVID. So what is recommended by allopathic physicians is that, even during the time when you have fever or post recovery, intake of a lot of protein and vegetables, which are heavy foods by the standards of Ayurveda, right? So that is what is recommended, especially if you had been put on, say, antivirals or steroids. That is a recommendation that came from the doctors, and my own family taken huge amounts of chana and rajma and 2-3 servings of vegetables and like that. But then later I realized when I came to you that is not what Ayurveda recommends. So how do you see this? And why is it that Ayurveda specifically prohibits such heavy kinds of food? And what can happen? I mean, in case you go ahead and take that, which I know people in my own family are still taking that kind of heavy foods because they're supposed to build strength back. So what could be the negative consequence of such an intake during and after the disease?
During the active phase, Sumati ji, I think it is definitely going to hamper the rate of recovery. So, and one thing that I've noticed is people who have started diet and medicine from day one, so they recover faster and better. And in terms of signs and symptomatology also, like persisting backache or the kind of feverish feeling. So all these things, they are actually indicating the pathology which is still there in the body. So with all these medicines, we are just trimming the shoots, and we are just suppressing, we are just stuffing all these toxins inside the body, and we are not allowing it to express itself. It is just that we are actually silencing them, but it is still there. So when such things happen, one effect is that there is reduction in the Agni. So the Agni is, kind of, it dwindles, and it's not able to carry out even the minimum possible activity that it has to. So once that happens, consequently, there is reduced dhatu bala, or some kind of weakness. So these look very silly and trivial. So these things, like you don't feel heavy, you don't feel like. So these things, when you ask for these symptoms, they look very trivial, but they are not trivial because they are actually indicating the dormant pathology in the body. So once this pathology becomes dormant, and after some time, it definitely you with you not having to do anything, it will definitely get deeper and deeper in the tissues. So one thing in the form of itis, all the COVID complications. So there could be pericarditis that they are now saying, like from past 2 months, they're saying there could be post-COVID pericarditis, heart issue. So there could be problems with the eyes. So there could be many other kidney problems. There are the presentations could be many. So if this is left untreated, so one is the recovery is really bad, and definitely they'll end up in one or the other health issue. So, but what happens most of the times, people, if it is a sudden complication or if it manifests in a couple of weeks, they will still relate it to COVID. Okay, I had COVID, after 2 months I'm getting this. But there are many other conditions wherein the gap is too long. So people were affected with COVID last year, but this year, after many months, there is a chance that they can get some other disease, but people won't relate it to COVID-19. But in Ayurveda, we see that as untreated or improperly managed jwara. So once this jwara gets deeper and deeper in the body, so it can go up to destroying your sense organs also, like eyes. So it can have multiple complications. So, but in that crucial 15-day window, if we are eating all kinds of heavy food, especially like curds, that is what is the recommendation today, curds and egg, and a lot of milk, fruits, especially chiku or oranges. So these are these are actually helping the pathogen and not us. So it is actually creating that suitable bed. So definitely it will thrive, and it will definitely cause fatal complications. And also, there is one more role because there are people who have been following this proper diet and lifestyle, but still they say that, okay, I got afflicted with this and it was fatal. So again, for that, Ayurveda mentions the role of Ayu and Karma. So even this is to some extent karmic also. So that answers the question, I think.
I had just one question. Now, see, if you see every Ayurvedic physician and you, and generally everyone says that you cannot have one generic drug to treat everyone, right? But suppose, like, I mean, we were caught with this second wave totally unawares, and it was just so sudden, so rampant across the population. For something like that, don't you need something that will settle down things, at least at the first level, across the board? You know, without that, because there's also the thing with Ayurveda that, you know, it is not fast enough, it takes some time, this, that, you know. So do we have the time to wait all that long? And there is a huge section of population that is afflicted. So then isn't there something that is across the board and applicable to all, to at least contain it at the beginning? That is.
I think okay, Shalini. I think it is the diet which everybody can like that. That only that thing can be generically advised. So that is going to control the event, and that is not going to allow the disease to spread rapidly. So if we are doing that right from the day one, I think that is more than a medicine. But when it comes to medicine, I have this apprehension. Why? Because if a person is suffering from something called as Vata Paitika Jwara, so which is in total contrast to the medication which is being prescribed. So if that is of too much of hot potency or very intense, so instead of helping the patient, it can land him up in ICU. So that can actually aggravate even this golden milk. There are many people who have been taking this. Like even then we will be in a way undermining the efficacy of Ayurveda. So I think at least a diet, I think we can definitely control, and that is the most essential thing that we need to change. And that can be implemented at various levels also.
Okay, then coming to the diet, sorry, I'm taking other people's chance maybe in terms of asking questions. The one leads to another, so yeah. So in terms of diet, there is also this thing against Ayurveda that it doesn't allow you to eat anything interesting. It makes you eat all bland food. how you need the taste buds also to be sort of activated. So how can you keep on telling us eat only this, only this, only this, and that kind of thing? Of course, there is the other part that everybody goes with salads, vegetables. That's also bland. That's also the same thing over and over again. I agree. But then, in terms of Ayurveda, there is that thing against it. That it always says to eat bland. So how do you counter that? Because as people, as human beings, we all also want rasa, right? So that taste and you want to have something nice. It makes you feel good. So how do you incorporate all of that? That is my question.
Okay, Shalini. So I think it's Ayurveda doesn't really ask you to eat bland. So like if we are using this salt and the acrid taste in moderate quantities, that is still okay. But in case of active fever phase or just right after the recovery, so at least for 1 month, in that phase, it is definitely advisable to have only pathya. So again, here pathya you'll be given with many options. So it's not just one or two, but definitely not curds or milk. So that is definitely not the
That is
recommendation.
understandable.
And also, Ayurveda asks you to eat according to the rutus, the climatic changes. So in winters, so especially towards the end of November up to February. So that is the Hemanta and Shishira Rutu. So during that period, we are allowed to eat almost whatever we want. Like a lot of dairy products you can use, and meat. So there are many other things. So that is all dependent on the digestion. And even in rains, it's more of a little bit of spicy plus little oil. So there is always this taste and dominance. So we are just manipulating this taste so that it is going to help the Agni and help the body. But Ayurveda also recommends, a plethora of this thing, preparations, Kritana Varga. So that includes everything like vegetable pulao and everything. So including the dessert, this thing. So, but it is only based on the Rutus.
Ritus, okay.
And mainly Agni, the capacity to assimilate it.
And you should bring up a calendar of what foods are good for which season.
Correct.
I think, but that's the only way then you can sort of start regulating the eating habits of people, because there is no nothing that people follow as a pattern, through the year. Keeping in mind the seasons, the rutu, that is not there anymore. It needs to be rekindled, aligning with the seasons. It needs to be rekindled. So,
Priyanka ji, we have heard that, in 18th century, even British record shows us that our people were, Ayurvedic doctors were good at doing vaccinations. Okay. And they had very systematic approach of doing this vaccination. So till 18th century, we know that it happened. But in modern times, we do not see that, vaccination as such practiced by Ayurvedic doctors. Or are we not aware about the vaccination approach of Ayurvedic today? So is there any disconnect between, in the tradition of 18th century or 21st century? Or does Ayurveda have any vaccination technique to follow?
Okay. I think the answer is a bit tricky, Ramji, here. Because personally, I have reservations about vaccination. And when we talk of the Samhitas or the treatises, there is no direct reference that supports these practices related with the vaccination. So, but to your point that you said that there is a disconnect between then and now practitioners. So that is for sure. So, but I don't think it is. I'm not sure about whether or not there is a disconnect between then and now in the vaccination practice. But in every other respect, there is definitely a disconnect. So that is for sure. But vaccination, when we say, is it classically okay or is it documented in the text? Then the answer is a no. So, but I'm not aware of the tradition. That is still a hearsay for me. So even I've heard that they used to practice it. But I also have noted that like after my association with Shalini ji and all this Purva Paksha and all, what I've noted is there has been a consistent decline in everything. So the way we understand the Samhita, so that is there since I think 1,000 years from now. So the whole approach or the whole approach towards looking at a person itself has changed. Like when I'm talking about Ayurveda, so that is why recent texts also include some new diseases which are not there in the text. But that doesn't mean that the text didn't know and they were new additions. It's just that we lost that traditional knowledge.